Hi, I'm Melissa from Paint Party LI, and I will be painting along with you step by step today. We're going to be doing the Fairy Lit wine bottle with a sunflower on it. All right, and here's the supplies you'll need. Any sort of wine bottle, doesn't matter what size, what color, you can use any color you want. The paints I have are multi-surface, but you can use acrylic paint too. It's fine for this because you're not going to be drinking out of it the way you would a wine glass. I have yellow, green, brown, red, and white. I have a couple of different paintbrushes. One's a little flatter, one's a little pointier. A cup of water to wash my brushes, and some paper towel. All right, to get started, we're going to start by doing the circle in the middle of the flower. I'm going to mix a little bit of brown and white paint here, just so I can see it on the green. If you have a clear bottle, you may not need to mix any white in there at all. Okay, so I'm going to make just a circle, just kind of like a placeholder, the middle of that flower. You don't need to even fill it in yet. Okay, so I'm just making the circle in there so I know where I'm going to put my petals coming out from. I'm going to go back over that at the end with the brown so it overlaps the yellow a little bit. Okay, so I'm using my pointy brush, and I'm going to, again, mix a little white into some yellow paint. It doesn't take a ton of paint to paint on glass, very little, because you want to go nice and thin. All right, so what I'm going to do first is mark off where my petals will go. Okay, so the idea when you're making a nice thin line and you want to have it be a certain shape is that you want to treat this like a pen or a pencil. You want to hold it real close to the bristles, down by the metal, just like you would a pen, and then you want to kind of draw it in very gently. You don't want to press down. The more you press down, the bristles are going to spread out. You're going to get a very thick line. So we want a nice thin line, and I'm just going to kind of put placeholders here for my petals going around before I fill anything in. So I'm just doing an outline all the way around. Okay, just going to go one at a time, making it real pointy at the end. You could even go back in between later and add some little ones in here too. Okay, I'm just going to work my way all the way around. Again, when I get down to the end, making it nice and pointy. The bottom one's going to kind of go off the edge of the bottle. That's all right. Again, I mixed a tiny bit of white in this yellow paint just so it'll definitely show up and pop on this green bottle. Okay, I'm doing the petals really large, and I'm just going to work my way all the way around. Doesn't really matter how many petals you end up with, just as long as you fill around that circle. I have 6. You might end up with more or less, that's fine. All right, so we're going to start to fill all of these in. Again, I'm mixing a little bit of white with some yellow paint, and I'm just going to start filling them in. So what I'm doing is going inside the outline of each one of those. Nice thin coat. The thing about painting on glass is that usually you need at least a second coat, but don't start on that second coat until it's completely 100% dry. Okay, so I'm filling this in. Try not to get any of that brown. I'm just getting real close to it. Okay, and I'm going to work my way all the way around, doing a little yellow and white. Okay, filling all the way around. I am going real thin with the paint. It's okay to see through it. It'll be streaky. That's normal. First coat. You need a second. coat once it's totally dry. So I'm going to go in here and just fill all of these in. Now, what you don't want to do is go over the paint while it's still wet. What will happen then is that it'll start to lift up off the glass and have a very kind of crackly, crumbly look. If that happens, you want to wet your paper towel and just kind of remove it, or you can take a little Windex on a paper towel and just wipe it off, let it dry before you go back into that spot. Okay, so I'm going to let that dry while I work on something else, because those will all definitely need a second coat. But again, it has to be 100% dry. So if you have your other steps done and you want to go back to your petals and they're still wet, blow dry them a little bit with a hair dryer to make sure that they're nice and dry. All right, I'm going to fill in a little bit of brown in the middle here. I'll go back over this at the very end and kind of overlap it on the edge. But I'm just doing one coat now. I have a little brown with a tiny bit of white in there. Okay, I'm cleaning off my brush. I'm going to go in and put some of these leaves. Okay, so cleaning off my brush, tapping it off, drying it off here on the paper towel. Again, I'm mixing just a little bit of white with some green, just a little bit. I like it to show up and kind of pop a little bit, especially if it's on green background. Okay. You can pick any spot where you have an empty spot. I'm gonna do one down here. So I have a nice big opening over here. Okay, so when I do this, I'm gonna do 3 little pieces to my leaf, and then I'm just gonna fill it in. So I made a point at the end. 1 point over here, 1 point over here, and I'm just going to fill that in. Again, this is all just first coat. It's okay to be streaky. Okay, if you prefer to make just a leaf that's maybe one solid leaf shape instead of 3 little points on it, this might be a little bit easier. Just go in here like this and fill that in. Okay, what I'm also going to do is do kind of a little bit of a swirl coming off of there, like a little vine piece. Okay, so when I do that, I'm just going to pick any little spot here coming off of the leaf, do a little line, have it curl up and around, and then come out. So it looks like it has a little vine coming off of it. Okay, and then I'm going to wash the brush off. Now, I want to start doing second coats. So the yellow has to be super dry. I'm gonna blow dry it a little bit, and then I'll come back and we'll do some more. Okay, so now we're gonna go back in for our second coat. I'm gonna use my flatter brush for this, so I can kind of spread it on a little bit easier now that I drew in everything that I wanted. So I'm again just gonna mix a little bit of white with yellow. And I'm going to do a second coat on all of these petals. I can very gently, very lightly. I blew it dry to make sure all the paint was dry. If you go in too soon, it really is going to lift up that paint behind it and make it messy. So you want to wait until it's completely dry, or you want to blow dry it. Okay, just kind of going in petal at a time, filling it in so that it's much more solid. You see that second coat really, really covers. Okay, I'm going to fill in all of those, and then we'll go back in and do some highlights and stuff. I do have a little bit of white mixed in with this yellow, just to make it really pop on this dark green background. Again, it might not be super necessary if you have, like, let's say a clear bottle. I'm just going to go through each one, and you'll see again that second coat really makes a difference. Gives it such better coverage. I'm mixing a little bit of white in each time I do it. And leaving it a little bit streaky on purpose with that white in there so that it'll give those petals a little bit of dimension so it's not just one flat color. Okay, so I'm going and filling in all of those petals, little white and yellow mixed together. Making sure that that paint is super dry before you get started on a second coat. And this paint does dry very quickly. Even if you're using just a regular solid acrylic, it will. This one's the multi-surface. But they'll both dry very quickly. Just want to make sure there's no moisture in that paint at all when you start adding that second coat, otherwise it really will lift up. All right, so I've got a nice second coat on everything. Okay, I'm going to go back in now, and I'm going to add, again, more dimension and stuff on the middle of the flower, and then I'll go back in and add some details on the petals after that. Okay, so I'm cleaning off my brush, drying it off. I'm going to mix a little bit of white with the brown. And what I'm going to do is just load it up really well and then dab it, covering the edge of where the petals meet. So it kind of gives it a little bit of texture also. This one you don't have to go so super thin with because we're not going to be painting over this. We're not going to be waiting for it to dry. Okay, so I'm working my way all the way around. Again, I'm just really loading up that brush really well. Working all the way around. And going right over the edge of where the petals are. Okay, and then I'm going to clean off the brush because I'm going to do solid brown in the middle. Cleaning it off, drying it off, dipping into just some solid brown, and I'm going to dab right in the middle because I want it to be a little darker in the middle. Okay, dabbing that right in the middle there, going around in a circle. I am kind of overlapping that mixture of the white and brown. This way it kind of blends together just a little bit. All right, we got the middle of the flower done. I'm going to clean off my brush, tapping it down to the bottom of the cup, really getting all the paint out. Okay, I'm going to go back in and do the second coat on my leaves as well. Okay, so when I do this again, I'm adding just a little bit of white paint to my green, mostly because I'm using a green bottle and I want it to really show up. So I'm just doing a second coat on those. I have a very oversized flower here, but if you want to do a smaller one, that's fine too. Do a few of them even. Okay, just did a second coat there. I'll go back and add some detail into that afterwards. Cleaning off my brush. And I'm going to go in and add some of these highlights to the leaves. So I have some orange and I have some white. You'll see I have red paint. I'm going to mix that with a little bit of the yellow. If you want to use just straight orange paint, that's fine too. Okay, cleaning off my brush. I'm going to use the pointier one for this one. If you don't have a really pointy one, use a flat one and just use the side of it so it makes a nice kind of skinny little line as you go. Okay, when you're mixing red with anything, you want to take just a tiny bit because it really takes over quickly. So I want a nice orange. So I'm taking just a little bit of red, mixing some orange in there. You can make it as light or as dark as you want. I'm going to work my way around from the middle out and very gently dragging it out towards the edge here, going all the way around. My advice is start with less than you think you'll want, and you can always go back in and add a few more in there. Okay, going all the way around. Just a little here and there around the middle of the flower. Okay, and then I'm going to clean off my brush, tapping it down to the bottom of the cup, getting all the paint out, and then wiping it off on a paper towel. I'm going to go in with some straight white and add a few highlights on some of these petals. Just adding a little bit of white at the edge here and there. Not a complete outline. And I'm just adding a little bit right at the edge of that petal. Kind of, for me, I like it gives it a little bit of definition at the edge and really makes it feel like it's a separate petal than the other one, especially if you overlapped them a little bit. Okay, working my way around. Can do a little at the tip of the petal as well. Adding a little bit of white as you go onto each one. Again, it doesn't have to be a complete outline, just a little here and there. Okay, I'm going to clean the brush off, and I'm going to go in and do that on the leaves as well. Okay, so I'm taking just a little bit of white paint. My second coat is still a little tiny bit wet on this green, and that's fine because I'm not doing a complete coat. If I was doing a complete coat, I'd want it to be totally dry, but I want it to kind of blend in a little bit. So I'm brushing one right down the middle. And then I'll brush a few more towards the edges here and there. I'm defining that leaf a little bit more. And I'll do this guy up here. Again, going right down the middle with a little bit, and the less you press down, the skinnier the line will be. Okay, just adding a little bit in here and there. I'll give it a little bit on the vine as well. All right, the very last step is to put a cork in the top with some fairy lights. If you don't have that, you can order them on Amazon, or you can order them from me. I have a great supply of these. You just feed them in. And there's an on-off switch on the cork, which is nice. And at night, this looks really cool. You can really tell right now because it's light, but right, there you go. It has a little switch up on top. And there's your sunflower wine bottle. One last step you can do if you'd like to add a little bit more up here is you can put a piece of twine. So I have some jute twine. And if you want to just wrap it around the top, it looks pretty cool. Gives it a nice rustic feel. Move my paint out of the way. All right, this is just regular jute twine, inexpensive. You can find it at Home Depot, or sometimes the Dollar Tree has it. I'll tie a little knot in the back, or you can do a little glue on that. Just kind of finishes it off a little bit. All right, thanks for painting along today.